In the year 2006, Rahul finished his education in hospitality, culinary arts, and applied nutrition in India and went on to work in the hotel industry. Not long after, he took a keen interest in agriculture, specifically to understand the link from farm to fork. From then on, it seemed more of a joy to learn from farmers, and this fascination took him to Italy, where he studied at the University of Gastronomic Sciences. Having worked with Navdanya in India and slow food in Italy, Rahul spent the better half of the last 8 years working with and learning from chefs, producers, and farmers who all seem to possess wisdom that few textbooks can share.
Well, all this knowledge further cemented Rahul's passion for food and agriculture and led him to explore the world of indigenous people, where one can always find the interlinking holy-trinity of culture, man, and ecology. Today, Rahul's works as an evangelist at the Northeast Slow Food and Agro-Biodiversity Society, based in Meghalaya, India, an organization that intends to bridge the pleasure of taste with the responsibility of sustainable food production amongst indigenous people. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Rahul Antao.
Hello. Thank you. I'll be a little loud here. No, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rahul Antao, and I'm here today to take you on a journey into the world of cooks. Now, it's estimated that the average human being eats about 1,000 meals a year. I'm 27 years old, and in 27 years of my life, I've eaten around 27,000 meals. 27,000 meals. That equates to 15 months of constantly eating. A little over a year of my life dedicated to relishing food. There's something to admire in that number because it's the value that I give to food. In fact, it's the value that we all give to food, but very often goes unnoticed. The way I see food, it's like a package deal. We get the nutrients that we need for our body, but we also get this aspect of taste, this aspect of pleasure through eating. Voltaire, the French philosopher and historian and writer, sums it up the best when he says, "Nothing would be more tiresome than eating and drinking if God had not made them a pleasure as well as a necessity." Sure, the guy has a funny haircut and he has a funny dress code, but what he also has is a point. I mean, imagine a world where food was tasteless. Imagine going to a restaurant and ordering anything on the menu and it was bland. Imagine 27,000 meals had no taste at all. The very act of cooking with fire is something unique only to humans. In fact, the worldwide diversity of cooking is a reflection of the myriad of our nutritional, cultural, aesthetic, social, and religious values that we attribute to it. So, the person who's inspired me the most to get into this field has been this woman, my mother. As a child, I was always enthralled by my mom's culinary skills. I would spend days with her in the kitchen, watching her every move, noticing the nuances that went into making what I can only consider manna from heaven. As Goans, our kitchen was always manufacturing the most distinct and flavorsome aromas of vinegar and garlic and red chili. And festive seasons were even better. Festive seasons bring out the height of our culinary heritage. We've all been there, we've all witnessed it in our own homes. So, what happened next? I took up this interest in culinary arts. I graduated from a school in culinary arts. And I went on to explore this world of flavors and cooks and food. And somewhere in my learning curve, I took a deeper interest in understanding food on a more fundamental level. I questioned, if my mom makes such yummy tomato sauce, then who makes that tomato for my mom's sauce? I was in this hunt for diverse tastes. And much like this guy, Willy Wonka from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, who set out to explore the world of new flavors in Lumpa land. I needed to find my own Lumpa land. But of course, an indicator for finding diverse flavors is to look for diverse plants. And if you took the map of the world and chalked down the biodiversity hotspots and superimposed a map of indigenous peoples, you'd get a very evident match. This excited me so much that I ended up working here in the northeast of India amongst indigenous peoples. And to my luck, I'm working with an organization whose very aim is to connect people to the pleasure and importance of eating local foods. Now, most of us know this vegetable. Some of us call it a brinjal, or an aubergine, or an eggplant, or a guinea squash, or a garden egg, or for you botanists out there, Solanum melongena. But if you thought that was a lot of names for one vegetable, you'd love to learn that there's more than just one variety. Now, this is what I find interesting, because apart from the fact that they all look different, each one of these vegetables carries its own unique and distinct taste. The lady who grows those vegetables is her. Her name is Congradian. And I found those vegetables in a small little village here in Meghalaya. And she was growing them in a plot of land that was roughly the size of this stage, her kitchen garden. What I find impressive is not the fact that she knows how to grow these vegetables. That is impressive, don't get me wrong. But the fact that she knows how to use those vegetables in the kitchen and make them into delicious meals. So what makes people like Congradian, like my mum, and others who are passionate about food so special? What makes a cook so important? Well, over the last 10 odd years of working with food, I've realized that it quite simply boils down to these 4 qualities. The first is identity. We've all heard the expression, what you eat is who you are. Well, local cuisines are shaped by what is locally available. As Goans, we're infamous for our seafood. You know, we're a coastal state, and we've taken what is locally available and mastered it in the kitchen to form a culinary identity. But identity is also shaped through influence. To cite another Goan example, we have a dish called Vindaloo. Have any of you heard of Vindaloo, Goan Vindaloo dish? Yeah? Well, most people attribute to the name to something Goan. But the true etymology of the word is derived from 2 Portuguese words, vina da alos, wine and garlic. You see, what we did here was, we knew we didn't have wine, but we knew we had palm vinegar. So we localized the whole recipe. We started using palm vinegar with our garlic, and we added red chilies into it. And there we go, we made our own identity. And that's what I find interesting, because we adopt ideas, but we adapt them. The second is knowledge. We have many speakers here who are speaking on knowledge today. And knowledge is something I find very interesting, because very often we learn things that no textbook could teach you. Congradian taught me how to cook those vegetables, but I would have never found it in any textbook. She showed me how to grow them, and I would have never found them the way she does it in any textbook. Knowledge is information, and information is key. It is the power and manifestation of information from one generation to the next, and that knowledge becomes tradition. The third is skill. Skill is taking that knowledge and applying it. Through practice and experience in the kitchen, we enhance that skill, harness that knowledge, and reproduce it. When my mom makes her Vindaloo, it's always the same deliciousness. Every single time she does it. It's that you get that distinct flavor, that distinct aroma that spreads throughout the whole house, and we all know Christmas is coming next week. And finally, we have creativity. Creativity can be looked upon more as an attitude that is a reflection of the different permutations and combinations of using different ingredients. A good example is how we all have homemade masalas. Yeah? We take these different spices and we put it in different variations and in different measurements together because we tune it. You see, with creativity, We take what we already know and add to it. We constantly innovate. So these 4 qualities is what helps us to preserve and protect our culture, to choose what we want our farmers to produce. And in return, what we're doing is we're strengthening our own local economies, and we're protecting our environment. We're sustaining a diverse eating habit. And with it, we're eating local foods and seasonal foods. But of course, the world is changing. What you see on the left-hand side of your screen is just a handful of varieties of rice. Just a handful of varieties of rice that we've always consumed. But we're changing the norm of food today, and we're moving from the left-hand side of the screen to that. We're taking away this diversity of taste. And with it, we're destroying these 4 qualities. We're losing our identity, we're taking away our knowledge and skill, and we're depleting all our creative skills. You know, it's estimated that we have around 40,000 varieties of rice. 40,000 varieties of rice is an incredible number. To put it into perspective, I could have eaten a different variety of rice for each of my meals that I've had since I was born till today, and continue to do so for the next 10 odd years. And we're noticing this as a global phenomenon, happening everywhere. According to recent studies, about 130 plant, insect, and animal species are dying out every single day. We know that we have some 30,000 odd edible plants to eat. And out of 30,000 odd edible plants, we're eating only 20. 20 comprise of 90% of the world's food. And 3 grains, wheat, rice, and corn, account for half of the world's food intake. Given that we face such challenges, and given that we still have people like Congradian and my mum and others who are passionate about food around, we knew we had to do something. We decided a dream, what can we do here? We decided to set up a network of cooks. We wanted a platform for sharing and exchanging knowledge, for preserving and protecting these qualities of identity, knowledge, skill, and creativity. And the first thing that we decided to do was strengthen these qualities. And so we took them one by one and started working with them. With identity, we started having food festivals. Food festivals are a good entry point to glamorize these indigenous foods and showcase these diverse cuisines. Food festivals are also a way to reinsert that pride back into those culinary arts. And what we do is we throw the spotlight on the cook, and we showcase the cook as someone really important, as someone who still has these qualities. What started as a small festival in 2010 in Maflang, a little village here in Meghalaya, gathered maybe 100 odd people, has now become an international event where we are seeing participants from Thailand, from Bhutan, and other places around gather together. We're seeing an increased number of people coming to this event. And I think in many ways it shows us how interested we all are in food. We just naturally move there. We want to know what is, this event's happening every year, and there's food from Sikkim, there's food from Arunachal Pradesh, there's food from Bhutan. We want to taste these recipes. We want to taste these delicacies. What we did with knowledge was that one of the first things we observed was there's a lack of intergenerational knowledge transfer. We know that youth are not interested anymore in taking up this knowledge. So how do we work with it? We didn't just want to document knowledge and archive it and keep it in history books. We wanted to make it something more practical. And we knew the only way of working with youth was to make some fun activities. So we organized these biodiversity walks, where we'd go down to the village, we'd take these school children, take the elderly of the village, and we'd walk out into the forest. And initially we started it as just a walk, But then we gathered all these vegetables and came back, and suddenly we realized, well, let's cook them up together with the kitchen, with the children. And all of a sudden it became this big biodiversity picnic, where students together with the elderly were chopping vegetables and cooking together. And what the outcome of that was that today many of these schools are starting to use these wild edibles in a sustainable manner and reintroduce them back into the midday meal. Not just for an educational purpose to show these kids how to, cook with these edibles, but more from a nutritional point of view. The third was skill. Skill was something that was always there and has always been there. And we thought we'd work with this concept of indigenous cafes. An indigenous cafe is like a restaurant. It is a restaurant. And we enhance the skill of communities by adding this value of, this trend and the standard of aesthetics and the standard of, hygiene, which is something that's lacking over here. So we empower these communities to embrace these qualities into their culinary arts, so that we don't just end up going to a food stall and getting rice slapped onto a plate, but we end up going to a food stall and really enjoying these foods. Because when we eat with all our senses. But more importantly, what we wanted to do was tie in the consumer over here. And not just the consumer, but we also want to tie in the producers. So we connected this indigenous cafe to local producers, to consumers, and to sustainable foraging. The next was creativity. What do we do with creativity? We know there are the plethora of wild vegetables out there. We know there are crops that are neglected and underutilized. How do we get them back onto the plate before everyone starts moving to that standardization of taste? Well, we started contradicting the phrase, too many cooks spoil the broth. And we got all these cooks together in our network and we said, how can we all contribute towards this? How can we save these vegetables? How can we save these edibles? And one of the first things that we did was we started working with millet. Now, millet was a crop that was traditionally grown here and people consumed it. But when we did the research into understanding, what are the problems of millet, amongst many others, there was the problem of taste. They'd just take millet and mix it in with water and boil it and that's it. It was ready to eat. And that was the problem, that it wasn't tasty. So we said, okay, fine. We got one of the cooks who said, yeah, sure, let's make millet pancakes out of them. And then another one came along and said, yeah, let's stuff it with some local bananas. And then a third came and said, yeah, let's drizzle it with some local honey. The outcome was something so delicious that we're actually seeing a change in production pattern. People have started reviving this crop. Just that simple act of making a new recipe has suddenly changed the way people look at it. But do you see how just these 4 ideas have changed the way people are thinking? They've changed the way we're looking at food. Because we're slowly holding on to these qualities and strengthening them. In our search for sustainable development, in our search for well-being, we've taken everyone into account. But we factored out this one element, this element of the cook, from which everyone can benefit, from grassroots communities all the way up to policymakers. It pushes forward a more sustainable ecosystem. It pushes forward a better society. In 1992, this man won his election campaign on the phrase, "It's the economy, stupid." Given that we're still searching for some of these missing links to what could be that answer to sustainable development, to well-being, we've taken everyone into account, the economists, the agriculturists, the agronomists, the farmer, the conservationists. But we're still asking what's missing. I would say maybe it's time we said, it's the cook, stupid. On that note, I would encourage you all to go back home and reconnect with your senses. Be one with your food again. Because it starts with taste and gets routed back to seed. And in the middle stands the cook. So thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rahul Antao.